Ethan Blackwood had successfully scrubbed the past clean. His divorce from Lana was 8 months old, his conscience was muffled by his booming career, and his new relationship with Vivian was a masterpiece of polished tranquility. He had convinced himself that his greatest risk was the stock market, but the past doesn't always stay buried. For Ethan, the moment of reckoning didn't arrive with a furious phone call or a legal notice. It arrived with the glint of crystal and the scent of fine dining. He was enjoying a celebratory dinner, the pinnacle of his new life, when he looked up and saw Lana, his quiet, unassuming ex-wife. She was wearing a server's uniform, an apron stretched tight over a visibly pregnant belly. The sight was a gut punch. Not only was she working a humbling job he assumed she was above, but her pregnancy, which could only belong to him, meant the foundation of his perfectly built new world was based on a monumental lie and a betrayal of responsibility. In that one shattering glance, Ethan realized his greatest fear wasn't losing his empire. It was losing the truth about the child he never knew he had. His perfect new life was suddenly poisoned by the inescapable past, forcing him to make a choice that would cost him everything he had built. Chapter 1. The shattering moment. What if the past you tried so hard to bury resurfaces in the most shocking way imaginable, threatening to dismantle your new, perfectly constructed life? Ethan adjusted his tie in the reflection of the pristine restaurant window. Tonight's dinner was special, a carefully orchestrated opportunity to show Vivian, his girlfriend, how much he valued their relationship. With a practiced smile, he walked to his reserved table, meeting Vivian's radiant gaze across the softly lit room. She looked stunning in her sapphire blue dress. The restaurant bathed in warm light. An elegant decor exuded exclusivity. Ethan settled into his seat, offering a smooth compliment as the sommelier poured a bottle of expensive wine. Everything felt perfect, as if life was finally clicking into place after months of uncertainty following his divorce. Vivian was the epitome of his fresh start, sophisticated, serene, and seemingly untouched by the chaos of his past. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by easy laughter and knowing glances. Then, in an instant, everything shattered. Ethan looked up to flag a waiter, and his eyes froze on a sight that sent ice through his veins. Standing just a few feet away was Lana, his ex-wife. She wore a waitress uniform, an apron barely concealing her distinctly round, pregnant belly. She was pregnant. A wave of nausea washed over Ethan. He couldn't help but wonder how she had ended up here. He remembered that, after their divorce, Lana had steadfastly refused any financial help, insisting she wanted to rebuild her life independently. But seeing her working, pregnant in a place like this, ignited a sharp pang of guilt within him. The air in the opulent dining room suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. Ethan felt his heart pound against his ribs, his hands clenching tightly beneath the table. What was she doing here? And why was she serving tables in a place like this? But even more chillingly, whose child was she carrying? Vivian, completely unaware of the emotional storm brewing inside Ethan, continued speaking until she finally noticed his fixed, horrified gaze. "Is everything all right, darling?" she asked with a worried tone, following the direction of his stricken look. Lana, sensing the sudden attention, quickly turned and vanished through a side door. Ethan, speechless, could only murmur something unintelligible. His mind was miles away, struggling to process the scene he had just witnessed. In the 8 months since their divorce, he had done everything possible to leave the past behind, meticulously building a life that excluded Lana. Yet, seeing her pregnant, he couldn't help but wonder if it had happened during the final days of their marriage or shortly after. The dates didn't quite line up, and that uncertainty added a new layer of confusion to his already racing thoughts. "Do you know her?" Vivian pressed, growing increasingly intrigued. Ethan shook his head, but his denial lacked conviction. Vivian frowned, but didn't push further, resuming the conversation while Ethan made a forced effort to appear normal. However, his mind was trapped in a whirlwind of unanswered questions. As Vivian talked about their weekend plans, Ethan couldn't help but recall the last days of his marriage to Lana. They had been difficult months, marked by constant arguments and an irreparable distance. She had pleaded for emotional support, but he, consumed by his work and ambition, had chosen to ignore her needs. When they finally signed the divorce papers, Ethan convinced himself it had been for the best. Now, confronting this image of a pregnant Lana unearthed buried guilt and doubts he desperately wished to avoid. The night dragged on, but Ethan barely touched his food. As Vivian spoke, he kept glancing furtively toward the side door where Lana had disappeared, half expecting, half fearing, to see her return. She never did. At the end of the dinner, Vivian excused herself to go to the restroom, leaving him alone at the table. Ethan seized the moment, calling over the nearest waiter. "Excuse me, could you tell me the name of the waitress who was attending this section earlier?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The waiter looked confused. "Lana? I think her shift just ended. I'm not sure, but she's been working here for a few months." The name confirmed what he already knew, but hearing it from someone else's lips brought a fresh wave of nausea. Lana was working there, and had been for months, while he hadn't even paused to consider how she was faring after the divorce. Now, with the information he had, Ethan could not ignore what he had seen. The image of Lana, pregnant and working in that place, burned into his mind as a constant reminder of something he had failed to face. When Vivian returned to the table, Ethan had regained some composure, but his mind was still caught in a torrent of thoughts. They left the restaurant together, and though Ethan tried to keep the conversation light, Vivian noticed his distraction. "Are you sure everything is all right?" she asked as they got into the car. "Yes, just tired," he replied. That night, as Vivian slept soundly in his bed, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Lana's face, her swollen belly, and the way she had avoided his gaze would not leave him alone. For the first time in months, he realized that the past he had tried so hard to leave behind was about to return with more force than he ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Scars of the Past. What hidden regrets truly haunt us, waiting for a moment of truth to shatter the illusion of a perfect new beginning. Ethan woke up the next day with an unshakable feeling of unrest. He had spent hours tossing and turning, trapped in a jumble of memories that time had failed to erase. As he sipped his coffee in the kitchen, with Vivian still asleep, his mind returned again and again to the image of Lana, working in that restaurant, visibly pregnant. There was something deeply unsettling about seeing her that way, as if her unexpected appearance had reopened a wound he believed had healed long ago. He recalled the early years of his relationship with Lana. They had been young, full of dreams and boundless hope. Lana was a passionate woman, with an energy that illuminated any room. She had supported him unconditionally as he built his business empire, sacrificing many of her own ambitions to be his rock. But over time, Ethan began to change. Work became his sole priority, and long nights at the office became the norm. Romantic dinners were replaced by business meetings, and shared weekends turned into hours glued to his phone and email. The distance between them didn't appear suddenly, but like a slowly widening fissure. Lana tried to talk to him, explaining how she felt ignored, how she needed his emotional support as much as he needed hers professionally. But Ethan always had an excuse. "It's for our future. I just need to close this deal. We'll have more time soon." Every broken promise was another brick in the wall separating them. The memory of their last argument still haunted him. Lana had cried, begging him to listen, to understand how much he was losing by focusing only on his career. Ethan, frustrated and exhausted, had replied coldly, "If this isn't enough for you, then maybe we should just end it." He hadn't expected her to take him seriously. But the next day, Lana had packed her bags and left. That was when he realized he had lost her. Returning to the present, Ethan wondered how they had reached that point. Lana, a woman who had once been his partner and confidant, was now just a shadow of the past he had tried to forget. But seeing her pregnant changed everything. Was that child his? If so, why hadn't she told him? And if not, who was the father? The guilt began to gnaw at him. He had dedicated the last months to building a new life with Vivian, someone who represented stability and simplicity. But now, he couldn't ignore that he had left a chapter of his life unfinished. He wondered if he had been selfish to assume Lana would be fine after the divorce, to assume she could move on as he had. Ethan knew he couldn't stand idly by. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things he needed to understand. Although a part of him feared confronting the past, another part knew he wouldn't find peace until he did. As he looked out the window, Lana's face returned to his mind, and with it, a decision began to form. He needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. Chapter 3. The inevitable confrontation. Can a desperate heart find the courage to confront a past it shattered, even when the truth promises to be devastating? Ethan couldn't get Lana out of his head. Days turned into a week, but the image of his pregnant ex-wife working as a waitress pursued him relentlessly. At the office, while reviewing contracts and attending meetings, his mind drifted to the past, to what he had left unresolved. At night, when Vivian tried to talk, he responded in monosyllables, distant. There was something about that unexpected encounter that had completely destabilized him, a nagging sense of obligation he couldn't ignore. Finally, his gnawing curiosity overcame his reluctance. He decided to return to the restaurant where he had seen her, this time alone. He told Vivian nothing. He wasn't ready to explain the turmoil raging inside him. He arrived early, before the dinner rush, and ordered a table with a view of the entrance. Pretending to be absorbed in his phone, he kept his eyes fixed on the staff moving in and out of the kitchen. After a few tense minutes, he saw her. Lana was there, carrying a tray with the same serene expression she had always had. Though now her eyes reflected a weariness Ethan didn't remember. Her pregnancy was undeniable. Although her uniform tried to hide it, her swollen belly spoke for itself. Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. He didn't know how to approach her, what to say after so long. Yet he knew he couldn't leave without answers. He waited patiently until Lana approached a nearby table. Feigning casualness, he called her name. "Lana," he said in a soft but firm tone. She froze for a moment, as if she had seen a ghost. Slowly, she turned toward him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice tight. "I wanted to see you," he replied, getting straight to the point. "We need to talk." Lana looked at him incredulously, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I'm working," she snapped. But Ethan was not willing to let the conversation end like that. "Please," he insisted. "Just 5 minutes, not here, after your shift. I promise it won't be more than that." Lana stared at him, weighing his words. There was something in his expression that made her hesitate. Finally, she sighed in reluctant surrender. "I get off at 10, she said, before walking away to continue her work. The hours dragged on for Ethan as he waited in his car, parked across from the restaurant. When the clock struck 10, he saw Lana leave through the back door, wrapped in a light coat. He approached quickly, his heart racing. "Thank you for coming," he said sincerely. Lana looked at him with a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. I don't know what you expect from this conversation, Ethan, she said. But I don't have time for games. I just want answers, he replied. I need to know how we got to this point, and if the baby is mine. His last sentence came out almost as a whisper, but it was enough to make Lana's eyes harden. Then you had better listen carefully, she said, crossing her arms, because I won't repeat myself. Chapter 4. The inescapable truth. What happens when the truth you've spent years avoiding collides with your life, demanding not only recognition, but a commitment you never planned? Lana stared at him, her expression a combination of exhaustion and fierce determination. Ethan, standing before her, felt the weight of her gaze. She wasn't the same woman he had known. There was something different about her, something that time and circumstances had changed. He took a deep breath, trying to keep calm as he waited for her to speak. The baby is yours, Ethan, she finally stated, blunt and direct. Her voice was firm, as if she were tired of carrying the secret alone. But don't expect that to mean anything else. I'm doing fine on my own, and I don't need anything from you. The impact of her words hit Ethan like a blast of cold air. He had entertained the possibility, but hearing it directly from Lana made the reality feel more tangible, more it's inescapable. Why didn't you tell me sooner? His tone was not accusatory, but filled with confusion and a hint of pain. We had a right to know, Lana. I had a right to know. She let out a laugh, but it wasn't a joyful sound. It was bitter, laden with frustration. A right? What are you talking about, Ethan? When I needed you, you were never there, and now you think you have a right to something. She paused, narrowing her eyes. I didn't come looking for you, because I knew you couldn't give me anything but excuses. I made the decision to move on without you, because that was what was best for me and for this baby. Ethan felt Lana's words pierce through every layer of self-defense he had built. He knew that, in a way, she was right. He had chosen his work, his ambition, over and over again, above her. But the fact that she had made such a monumental decision without including him made him feel even more isolated from what was once his life. Lana, I know I made mistakes, he said, forcing himself to maintain a calm tone. I know I failed as a husband, but this baby is different. He is my son too. I want to be part of his life, even if it's late. She observed him silently for a moment, as if evaluating the sincerity of his words. Finally, she sighed and looked away. I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan. Not after everything that happened. I learned to manage on my own, and I don't want this baby to go through what I went through with you. Let me prove to you that I've changed, Ethan insisted. I'm not saying it will be easy, but I want to try. For the baby. For us. Even if we don't get back together. Lana shook her head, still reluctant to give in. I don't know if I can believe you, she said softly. But I also can't deny my child the opportunity to know his father. However, Ethan, this doesn't mean I'm giving you a second chance. If you want to be involved, you'll have to earn it. Ethan nodded, accepting her challenge. He had a lot to prove, both to Lana and to himself. But in that moment, under the faint streetlights, he felt that perhaps this was the beginning of something new. Something he couldn't afford to mess up. Chapter 5. The collapse of a perfect life. What happens when the truth you've finally embraced forces you to dismantle the very life you meticulously constructed, leaving a trail of shattered expectations? The next day, Ethan returned home with his mind in a whirl. The conversation with Lana still resonated in his head, every word charged with reproach and uncomfortable truths. He knew she was right. He had failed her as a husband, and now he had to prove he wouldn't make the same mistakes as a father. But as he tried to process everything, he also knew there was something else he had to face. Vivian. Vivian greeted him with her usual warm smile, preparing coffee in the kitchen, oblivious to the thoughts tormenting Ethan. You're home early today? she commented softly, pouring the liquid into 2 cups. "How was your day?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. He had been avoiding this conversation, but he knew he couldn't hide the truth much longer. Vivian wasn't foolish, and his increasing distraction hadn't gone unnoticed. "We need to talk," he finally said, his voice serious. Vivian placed the cup on the counter, turning to look at him. Her smile vanished when she saw the expression on Ethan's face. "What is it?" she asked, worried. He took a breath, trying to organize his thoughts. "Yesterday, when we were at the restaurant, I saw someone, Lana." The mention of his ex-wife made Vivian frown. She knew about the divorce, but Ethan had rarely spoken of Lana, as if she were a closed and filed chapter of his life. "And?" she asked cautiously. "She was working there, and she's pregnant," Ethan continued, his voice tight. "Vivian, the baby is mine." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Vivian stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. She seemed to process his words slowly, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Are you saying your ex-wife is pregnant? With your child? And you are finding out now?" "Yes," Ethan replied, feeling the full weight of the situation. "She told me last night. I had no idea, Vivian. I didn't know anything until I saw her." Vivian took a step back, crossing her arms. She had spent months building a relationship with Ethan, trusting that he had left his past behind. Now, everything she thought she knew about him was crumbling. "And what does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice laden with emotion. "What are you going to do now?" "I want to be part of my son's life," Ethan said firmly. "I can't ignore this, Vivian. It's my responsibility." She looked at him with a mixture of disappointment and pain. "And what about us? Where do I fit into all this? Or does everything now revolve around Lana and that baby?" "Vivian, this has nothing to do with how I feel about you," he tried to explain. "But I can't turn my back on my son. I hope you can understand." Vivian shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know if I can, Ethan. I don't know if I can be a part of this." Vivian paused, her gaze reflecting an internal struggle. "I need time to think. This is not what I expected from our relationship." Without waiting for his answer, she left the room, leaving Ethan alone with his growing sense of loss. He knew his decision would have consequences, but he never imagined they would cost him so much. Chapter 6. Rebuilding Trust and the Price of Redemption and Building Trust. Ethan was left alone in the kitchen, staring at the door through which Vivian had exited. The house, which normally felt warm and inviting, now seemed cold and silent. Vivian's reaction was a blow he was unprepared for, but he couldn't blame her either. He himself could barely process everything that was happening, and he knew it wouldn't be easy for her to accept the implications of his decision. The days that followed were dense with tension. Ethan, accustomed to having control over every aspect of his life, now felt as if he were walking on a tightrope. On one hand, there was the commitment he had made to Lana and the baby. On the other, his relationship with Vivian seemed to unravel further with every conversation. She had distanced herself, spending more time away from home and limiting any meaningful exchange to the strictly necessary. Ethan knew he had to face that situation, but every time he tried to talk to her, the conversations ended in tense arguments. Vivian was hurt, and Ethan understood why. But despite everything, his priority remained Lana and the baby. Ethan decided to focus on what he could do. He knew he wouldn't earn Lana's trust with just words, so he set out to prove he was serious. One afternoon, after leaving work, he stopped at a baby supply store. He had no idea what he was looking for, but he walked the aisles with determination. After a quick call to his assistant for advice, he ended up buying a crib, clothes, diapers, and some toys. And that night, he loaded his car with the packages and drove to Lana's small apartment. As he climbed the stairs, bags in hand, he felt a strange nervousness, as if he were about to face a crucial job interview. He knocked on the door and waited. Lana opened it with a surprised expression that quickly turned cautious when she saw Ethan loaded with packages. "What are you doing?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I brought some things for the baby," he replied, showing her the bags. "I know it's still some time away, but I thought maybe we could start preparing. I want to help, Lana." She stared at him for a few seconds that stretched into eternity, trying to decipher his intentions. Finally, she stepped aside to let him pass. Ethan placed the bags in a corner of the small living room and looked around. The place was modest, but clean and cozy. There were clear signs that Lana was making the best of what she had. "It's a lot," she finally said, looking at the bags with a mix of gratitude and distrust. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," Ethan replied sincerely, "but I want to. I can't change what happened between us, Lana, but I can be here now for you and for the baby." Lana sighed and sank onto the sofa, her gaze softening slightly. "This doesn't change anything, Ethan. It doesn't mean I fully trust you. But thank you. This will help a lot." Ethan nodded, accepting her answer without trying to force anything more. He knew earning her trust would be a slow process, and he was willing to wait. A few minutes of uncomfortable silence passed before Ethan decided to leave. "If you need anything at all, call me. No matter the time." Lana accompanied him to the door. Before he left, she looked at him with a slight smile. "Thank you, Ethan. Truly." As he drove back home, Ethan felt a spark of hope. There was a lot to repair, but at least he had taken the first step. Although his life was still chaotic, that night he allowed himself to believe he was on the right path. The price of redemption. Ethan began to involve himself more in Lana's life and in the preparations for the baby's arrival. Although she maintained a certain emotional distance, she didn't reject his help. He spent several afternoons with her, assembling the crib he had bought, organizing the tiny baby clothes, and making sure she lacked nothing. Each gesture, each shared moment, was Ethan's attempt to show that he was serious this time. However, his relationship with Vivian continued to deteriorate. She barely spoke to him and spent nights away, staying at a friend's house. Ethan knew he had to face that situation, but every time he tried to talk to her, the conversations ended in tense arguments. Vivian was hurt, and Ethan understood why. But despite everything, his priority remained Lana and the baby. One afternoon, while helping Lana organize the last details in the apartment, she observed him silently from the sofa. Ethan, focused on installing a small mobile over the crib, didn't notice Lana's gaze at first. When he finished, he turned to her and saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time, a mix of gratitude and perhaps a glimmer of respect. "You've changed," Lana said suddenly, breaking the silence. Ethan was surprised by her words. "You think so?" he asked, with a small spark of hope in his voice. Lana nodded, crossing her arms. "I don't know if you're the same man I married, but I do know that this Ethan is trying, and that means a lot." He sat beside her, taking a moment to assimilate what she had just said. "I want you to know that I truly regret what happened before. I can't change what I did, but I'm here now, and I won't fail you again." Lana didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be dealing with her own thoughts, her own fears. Finally, she spoke softly. "I don't expect everything to be perfect. I just expect you to be consistent. This baby deserves it, and so do I." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of those words. He knew he still had a lot to prove, but for the first time in months, he felt he was beginning to rebuild something with Lana, even if it wasn't a romantic relationship. That same night, back at his house, Ethan found Vivian waiting for him in the living room. Her expression was cold and resolute, as if she had made a decision she could no longer postpone. "We need to talk," she said. Crossing her arms, Ethan sighed and sat down across from her. He knew what was coming, and although it hurt, he also knew he couldn't stop it. "I can't continue like this," Vivian said, her voice firm but laden with emotion. "I am not the woman who can accept being a second priority in your life. You need to focus on your son and on Lana. And I need something different." Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand, Vivian, and I'm sorry for putting you in this position." She looked at him one last time, with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Ethan. Take care of that baby." When Vivian left, Ethan was left alone, with an emptiness in his chest, but also with a conviction he hadn't possessed before. He knew that although he had lost Vivian, he was doing the right thing by prioritizing his son and Lana. It was the price he had to pay for his past mistakes, but he was willing to face it. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was moving in the right direction. Chapter 7. The birth of a new beginning and the arrival of a new life heal old wounds, offering a chance for redemption and a family built on unexpected foundations. The day arrived sooner than expected. Ethan was at his office, reviewing documents, when his phone rang. Looking at the screen, he saw Lana's name, and a knot tightened in his stomach as he answered. "Ethan," she said, her voice strained. "It's the baby. I'm at the hospital." The words hit him like a lightning bolt. Without losing a second, Ethan dropped everything and rushed out. During the frantic drive to the hospital, his mind was a whirlwind of anxiety, excitement, and fear. He hadn't imagined the moment would come so soon, but he knew he had to be there, that he had to prove his commitment was real. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Lana in a bed, her face pale but serene. She was accompanied by a nurse adjusting the monitors around her. Ethan approached slowly, his heart racing. "How are you?" he asked, taking her hand gently. "I'm fine," Lana replied with a weak smile. "I think he's just in a hurry to meet us." They both laughed softly, although Ethan could feel the tension in the air. Over the next few hours, he stayed by her side, making sure she had everything she needed. The wait was long and exhausting, but Ethan didn't move for a moment. He was determined to be there for her and for his son. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctors entered the room and began the labor process. Ethan held Lana's hand tightly, offering words of encouragement as she battled through each contraction. He had never felt something so intense, so real. It was a moment that would change him forever. The baby's cry filled the room, and Ethan felt his whole world stop. When the doctor placed the newborn in Lana's arms, Ethan couldn't stop the tears from rolling down his face. It was a boy, perfect and fragile, barely covered by a small blanket. "He's beautiful," Ethan whispered, looking at the baby in awe. "He's our son." Lana looked at him with an expression of exhaustion, but also deep satisfaction. "Yes, he is." The next few minutes were a blur of emotions. Ethan took the baby in his arms, feeling an immediate connection he had never experienced before. In that instant, everything else ceased to matter. The mistakes of the past, the doubts, the fears. There was only him, Lana, and that small being who had just entered the world. Later, as Lana rested in her bed, Ethan sat by her side, holding the baby. "I promise I will be here for you too," he said firmly. "I won't fail you." Lana, though tired, looked at him with a slight smile. "I hope so, Ethan, for the sake of this little one." That night, Ethan felt as if a new door had opened in his life. He had lost many things, but he had also gained something invaluable. The opportunity to be better, to build something real and lasting, and he was not going to waste it. Chapter 8. The Unconventional Family. What does it truly mean to win in life? Is it material success, or the courage to embrace an imperfect path toward a deep connection and a family built on resilience? Months after the baby's birth, Ethan's life had changed in ways he never imagined. His routine, once dominated by long hours of work and endless meetings, now revolved around diapers, bottles, and his son's small but significant milestones. Although the path had not been easy, every sacrifice was worth it when he saw his son smile or held his tiny hand in his own. Lana, for her part, had begun to see Ethan in a new light. Although she maintained a certain emotional distance, she couldn't ignore the genuine effort he was making. He was present at every doctor's appointment, through every sleepless night, and in every small moment that required patience and dedication. Sometimes, she watched him playing with the baby and wondered if this Ethan had always been there, hidden beneath the excessive ambition that had once separated them. One afternoon, while they were at the park, Ethan pushed the stroller while Lana walked beside him. It was a sunny day, and the baby was sleeping peacefully under the shade of a tree. Ethan broke the silence. "You know," he said, his gaze fixed on the path, "I never thought my life would take this turn, but now I can't imagine anything different." Lana looked at him sideways, evaluating the sincerity in his voice. "You've changed, Ethan. I see it in the way you care for our son. But don't forget, you're still building this. Trust is not recovered overnight." "I know," he replied with a slight nod, "and I'm willing to keep working on it, not just for him, but for you too. I want you to know I'm here for whatever you need." Lana smiled, a small but genuine smile. "You're doing well, Ethan. Better than I expected." Over time, the dynamic between them began to soften. Although they didn't become a couple again, they managed to find a balance that allowed them to be co-parents and, in a way, friends. Ethan strived to be consistent, demonstrating with actions what words alone could not repair. One day, while they were playing with the baby in Lana's living room, the little one, who was just starting to babble, reached out his arms toward Ethan. "Daddy," he said with a mischievous smile. Ethan felt a lump in his throat, his heart pounding. It was the first time he had heard that word from his son's lips. Lana looked at him, and in her eyes was a mix of emotions: pride, tenderness, and a spark of hope. "I think he likes you," she said with a smile. "I hope it will always be this way," Ethan replied, taking the baby in his arms. "I promise I will never fail him." The family that was once fragmented was now finding its own way. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Ethan, that was enough. He had learned that true success was not in his career or his bank account, but in the connections he built with the people who mattered most. And this time, he wasn't going to let it go. Chapter 9. The Mature Promise. Ethan's new life was a delicate balance between the boardroom and the nursery. He had learned to end his workday at 5 in the afternoon, a habit he once considered impossible, in order to be home in time to bathe his son. He had had to sacrifice some lucrative deals and several late meetings with partners, but in return, he received his child's irreplaceable smile. The relationship with Lana had evolved from reluctant distance to respectful cooperation. They often ate dinner together, but not as a romantic couple, but as two dedicated collaborators. Lana still maintained a fragile emotional wall, a living testament to the wounds of the past. But she had begun to trust Ethan's consistency. One night, after their son was soundly asleep, Ethan and Lana sat in the cozy apartment. Soft jazz music played on the small speaker. Ethan had just finished installing a new shelf for the baby's books. "Thank you, Ethan," Lana said, sipping her tea. "This shelf looks great. You have really changed." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. It was the recognition he had been waiting for. "I had to change," he admitted, looking into her eyes. "When I focused too much on building a name at work, I forgot to build a home with you. I treated you like a support system, not a partner." Lana looked out the window. "You broke many things, Ethan. Not just the marriage, but my trust and support. I had to leave and rebuild everything from scratch, carrying with me a secret I didn't dare to tell you." "Why didn't you tell me about the baby then?" Ethan asked, not with reproach, but with sincere curiosity. Lana sighed. "Do you remember our last fight? You said if I wasn't happy, we should end it. At that moment, I was already a few weeks pregnant, but seeing your cold gaze, I knew you would consider the baby an obligation, not a miracle. I didn't want my son to grow up in a home where his father was only there out of duty." Her words were like a sharp dagger. Ethan lowered his head, remembering his own cruelty and exhaustion. "You're right. I was a terrible husband. I was a terrible man." He lifted his head, his look full of determination. "But I will never be a terrible father. I will always be here for you and for him." Lana smiled, the most genuine and serene smile since they had reunited. "You are proving it every day, Ethan, and I believe you." It was not a declaration of love, nor a promise of reconciliation. It was a mutual commitment for a better future, based on respect and responsibility. At that moment, Ethan knew that, although Vivian was gone, and although he and Lana were no longer a couple, he had truly found his home, not in glass skyscrapers, but in the eyes of his son, and the hard-won trust of the woman he once lost. Chapter 10. The Challenge of the Past. This newfound peace did not last long. One Monday morning, as Ethan was preparing for a crucial meeting, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello, Ethan." The voice on the other end was low and unsettlingly familiar. "We have a couple of things to talk about." It was Vivian. She had been silent for almost 6 months since they broke up. "Vivian, what is it?" Ethan tried to keep his composure. "What is it?" She laughed scornfully. "You've had time to build a new model family, haven't you? I saw photos of you and Lana taking your son to the park in a magazine. What do you think about turning your private life into a headline?" Ethan froze. His company was launching a PR campaign about work-life balance, and the PR department had taken some photos of him with his son. He thought this wouldn't affect anyone. "Vivian, it's just a company strategy." "Don't justify yourself." Her voice was full of rage. "You said you had to focus on your son and I agreed to leave. But now, you are using your own private story for branding. I sacrificed, and you are making money off your guilt." Vivian took a deep breath. "I'm calling to tell you I'm suing you. Not for money, but for the lie. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the real story behind your model father image." The call ended, leaving Ethan in dead silence. He realized that the past was not just the decisions he had made, but also the consequences he had left on others. His biggest challenge was not winning Lana back, but facing the public and the price of truth. Chapter 11. Lana's reaction. Vivian's lawsuit and the impending public exposure fell upon Ethan's life like a bomb. At first, he tried to hide the news from Lana, but it was impossible. Digital media headlines quickly appeared, portraying Ethan as the business tycoon who abandoned his pregnant wife to pursue an image of perfection with a new partner, only to use redemption as a PR stunt. When Lana saw the article, she felt betrayed again. Although she was no longer in love with Ethan, the trust she had worked so hard to rebuild with her child's father wavered. That afternoon, when Ethan returned to Lana's apartment, she was waiting for him with her laptop open, displaying a scandalous headline. Her face showed no anger, but deep, painful disappointment. "You didn't tell me anything," Lana said, her voice low and firm, more dangerous than a scream. "I was going to tell you, Lana, but it all happened very fast." Ethan approached, but she raised a hand to stop him. "This is not about Vivian or the lawsuit. This is about how you handle crises, Ethan. Do you still think you can hide things until they explode? You promised me honesty. You promised me you wouldn't fail us again, and the first thing you do is try to hide the truth that could affect our son." Ethan felt the weight of his mistakes. He had focused on controlling the narrative, forgetting that the person who mattered most needed the truth directly from him. "You're right. You are absolutely right," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I was stupid. I'm terrified of losing what we have, and my first instinct was to try to fix it with money and control, the way I've always done things. But that's not how it works with you, and that's not how it works with our son. Lana closed the laptop, exhaling deeply. If you want to stay in our son's life, Ethan, you have to do two things. First, you have to face this truth head on. Don't hide, don't cover it up. Be honest with yourself and the public. Second, you have to promise me that no matter what, you will protect our son's privacy. Don't use him. Don't expose him. I will. I will do whatever it takes, Ethan replied with conviction. He knew Lana was giving him one last chance. Good. Because this is my bottom line, Ethan. If this controversy touches our son, it's over. You will have to deal with the consequences of your mistakes alone. Ethan nodded, feeling a chill. He knew his career might be at stake, but the threat of losing his son was far worse. He had to change his focus, and for the first time, fight for ethics, not image. Chapter 12. The Press Conference. The Price of Honesty. The following days were a media frenzy. The pressure became unbearable, forcing Ethan to make a drastic decision. Contrary to the advice of his legal and public relations team, who advised him to deny, downplay, or settle silently, Ethan decided to call a press conference. He stood in front of dozens of cameras and journalists, in a perfectly pressed suit, but with an expression of vulnerability he had never before shown in public. I am here today, Ethan began, his voice resonating in the room, to address the accusations made against me by Ms. Vivian and the many articles that have surfaced. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. I will not deny anything. Ms. Vivian is right about one thing. I was selfish. I divorced my ex-wife, Lana, because I was blind by ambition and comfort, and I failed her at a critical time. I did not know she was pregnant until months after the separation, and instead of facing my mistakes with humility, I focused on building a new life that was superficially perfect. Ethan continued, his speech unscripted, straight from the heart. Recently, my company asked me to participate in a work-life balance campaign. The truth is, I accepted because I liked the idea of having a good father image. That was a mistake. I used redemption and the love for my son for public benefit, and that was an act of profound dishonesty. He gestured apologetically toward the camera. I apologize to Ms. Vivian for the pain I caused her, and to my ex-wife, Lana, and to my son, whom I promised to protect from publicity. Today, I resign as CEO of fictitious company name, to dedicate all my time to being a present father and to mending my mistakes in a real way, not for a photo shoot. The only image that matters to me now is the one my son sees. The stunned silence in the press room was total. Ethan had chosen radical honesty over corporate control. It was a professional disaster, but an essential step on his path to personal redemption. Leaving the press room, his PR team was furious, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt free. He headed directly to Lana's apartment. She was watching the live broadcast when he arrived. Lana said nothing. She simply got up, walked toward him, and gave him a brief but meaningful hug. That was a risky move, Lana said, pulling away. It wasn't a move, it was the truth, Ethan replied, feeling immense relief. I'm not going to lie anymore. And now what, Ethan? Lana asked, smiling slightly. Now, Ethan shrugged with a feeling of lightness. Now I have time to be a father. Chapter 13. The Return to the True Home. Ethan's decision to resign as CEO was a shock in the corporate world, but it meant profound liberation for him. For the first time in 15 years, his schedule was not dictated by quarterly earnings, but by his son's nap time. The day after the press conference, Ethan sat on Lana's small sofa, watching his son babble. The luxury of unpressured time was the true success he had always sought. What are you going to do now without the company? Lana asked, preparing bottles in the kitchen. Now, I'm going to be a good father, Ethan replied with a genuine smile. and I guess I have to figure out how to pay the bills. Luckily, I sold my shares a while ago. I don't need to go back to big corporations." Vivian's lawsuit was quickly settled after Ethan's public confession. She withdrew the charges, realizing that he had already punished himself more severely than any court could. With his new free time and a deep need to make amends, Ethan focused on a more personal project. He remembered Lana's dreams of working in social causes, something he had always dismissed in favor of finance. "Lana, what would you think about creating a foundation?" he proposed one day. "Use the money I earned in the wrong way to do some good. Focus on supporting single mothers or women starting entrepreneurial projects. Something you're passionate about." Lana stared at him, moved by the sincerity of his proposal. "Are you really serious?" she asked. "Completely. And I want you to run it. You have the passion and the understanding I never had. I'll be the financial and logistical support." This was the true turning point. Ethan wasn't just offering money. He was offering trust and support to Lana's ambition, something he had never done during their marriage. Lana accepted, and together, but independently, they began to build a project with real meaning. Chapter 14. The new definition of family unpassed. The baby was now crawling, exploring the world with curiosity. The foundation thrived under Lana's leadership, and Ethan felt fulfilled supporting her success. He had found a new way to use his intelligence and resources, and his reputation, though no longer that of a brilliant CEO, was slowly transforming into that of a remorseful philanthropist and a devoted father. The relationship between Ethan and Lana had stabilized into a deep bond of affection and mutual respect. They were not lovers, but they were the strongest, most honest unit Ethan had ever known. Their home was Lana's apartment, their family, the trio that shared their son's laughter. One evening, while they were having dinner, pizza and a movie, a tradition Ethan never would have tolerated before, Lana leaned back on the sofa, exhausted, but happy. "I have a proposal for you, Ethan," she said suddenly. Ethan became alert. "Tell me." "The foundation is growing. We need a bigger office. And honestly, our son is growing. This apartment is getting too small for us." She looked at him with an expression that combined pragmatism and warmth. "I found a house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden. It has space for the foundation and for us to live. The three of us. As co-parents, of course. You don't have to move in if you don't want to. But it's a good space for our son to grow up in. And we can share the responsibilities without having to constantly drive." Ethan processed her words. Moving in with Lana was not a return to marriage, but a step toward lifelong co-parenting and a functional, though non-traditional, family. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" Ethan asked, with a mixture of surprise and hope. "I'm asking you to invest in our son's future and in our partnership. You've already proven that you are consistent, Ethan. And this time, I'm choosing to trust your presence." Ethan smiled. He had lost his corporation. He had lost his bachelor life with Vivian. But he had gained something much more valuable. "I accept," he said, without hesitation. "Buy that house, Lana, and let's build this home together." And so, Ethan and Lana found happiness in an arrangement no one would have predicted. He had learned that success is not measured in power, but in the ability to make amends, and that the perfect family doesn't exist, only the true family. Chapter 15. The Shadow of the Past. Ethan and Lana moved into the new house. It was a classic construction with a large garden, a dream come true for Lana, and the ideal space for their son to grow. Co-parenting under the same roof turned out to be surprisingly harmonious, based on shared schedules, respect for each other's boundaries, and the common goal of their son's happiness. One Saturday afternoon, the new family was celebrating a small barbecue in the garden, with some of Lana's friends from the foundation. Ethan, wearing an apron, felt happier than ever. far from the stress of Wall Street. Then, the front doorbell rang. Lana went to open it. Ethan was flipping sausages when he heard a voice that made his shoulders tense. It wasn't Vivian's voice, but one that belonged to an even more distant past, from his ambitious bachelor days before he married Lana. "Hello, Lana. I'm Isabel. Is Ethan there?" asked the voice, with a polite but unsettling familiarity. Ethan quickly wiped his hands and approached. In the doorway stood an elegant woman, with a palpable air of success. It was Isabel, a former colleague and rival from his corporate days, a person who represented everything he had left behind: the glamour, the limitless ambition, and, to be honest, a professionally intense relationship that almost crossed into personal. "Isabel, what a surprise," Ethan said, forcing a smile, feeling Lana's inquisitive gaze beside him. "Yes, I was passing through the neighborhood on business and saw your car. It looks like your retirement suits you well," Isabel replied, scanning the garden, pausing a moment on Lana and then the baby. Her tone was friendly, but her eyes coldly analyzed Ethan's change of life. "We're doing very well," Lana interjected, with forced calm, immediately sensing the power dynamic Isabel exuded. "This is the family home. Are you looking for Ethan for something in particular?" Isabel smiled, directing her attention to Ethan. "Actually, yes. I heard you sold your shares and are now free. My firm is looking for a partner for a very bold international expansion project. A project that will redefine financial technology. It's exactly the kind of challenge I know you miss." Isabel paused, whispering the last part, with a confidence that pointed directly to Ethan's dormant ambition. "I'm offering you a leadership position, with compensation that would allow you to turn this barbecue into a Monaco gala event. Think about it, Ethan. How long will the satisfaction of assembling baby cribs last?" The offer was a direct missile to the heart of the old Ethan. The adrenaline, the power, the money. Everything he had given up. Ethan looked at Isabel, then turned to look at Lana. She stared at him, without pressure, but with a silent question in her eyes. "Who are you really now?" The silence became thick. The friends in the garden stopped talking. The quiet happiness of his life hung in the balance. "Isabel, it sounds tempting," Ethan said, taking a deep breath. It was time to prove to himself, and to Lana, who the man he had become was. "But my redefinition project has already begun. It's called the Hope Foundation, and it's the most challenging thing I've ever done. And my current role is as Lana's strategic partner and a father." Ethan smiled, this time a genuine smile, devoid of corporate falsity. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm no longer interested in Monaco. I prefer a good wine in this garden." He turned to Lana and put his hand on her shoulder. "My true success is here." Isabel processed the answer with a blink. She grasped Ethan's seriousness. "I understand," she said, with a note of respect in her voice. "But you know where to find me if you ever get tired of assembling baby strollers." With a professional nod, Isabel left. When the door closed, Lana exhaled a sigh of relief, but also deep satisfaction. She didn't move to kiss him or congratulate him. She simply took his hand and squeezed it firmly. "Get back to the sausages, Daddy," Lana said, using the new nickname she had adopted. Ethan nodded, feeling richer and more powerful than when he ran his corporation. He had faced his greatest temptation, the memory of his old self, and had chosen the true family over the false promise of greatness. Epilogue: the wealth of the everyday. 2 years passed since Ethan rejected Isabel's offer and his corporate life. The Hope Foundation, led by Lana, had become a beacon for entrepreneurial mothers in the city, with Ethan managing the finances and strategic development from the home office. The media scandal was now a forgotten footnote. Their son, a 3-year-old whirlwind of energy, was the undisputed center of their universe. One afternoon, Ethan was in the garden, trying to assemble a plastic playhouse for the boy. Lana came out with 2 glasses of lemonade and sat down beside him on the lawn. Ethan was frustrated with the instruction manual. "I don't know how I managed to run a company with thousands of employees, but I can't put this toy together," Ethan said, laughing at his own irony. "You ran a company because you could delegate," Lana replied with a loving smile. "Here, you have to do it yourself, and that's good for you," Lana observed him. The tension in Ethan's shoulders had disappeared, replaced by a calm concentration. His eyes, once always looking toward the future and profits, now focused on the present moment. "Are you happy?" Lana asked, suddenly, directly. Ethan stopped, placed the plastic pieces aside, and looked at her. "I've never been happier. When I was at the top, I believed happiness was in the next deal, the next figure. It was an artificial happiness. Now, happiness is this. It's the dirt on my hands, the smell of the dinner you're cooking, and knowing that when I walk in, he'll call me Daddy." He took her hand. Their relationship, though not romantic, had an intimacy and respect deeper than any youthful love. They were partners in life, united by truth, regret, and an unconditional love for the child who was napping inside the house. "We built something good, didn't we?" Ethan asked. "We built something real," Lana corrected, squeezing his hand. "And that's much better than anything the old Ethan could have designed." With a shared smile, they both stood up. Ethan finally understood that true success was the ability to be vulnerable and the daily decision to be consistent. He had lost a fortune and a lifestyle, but in return, he had gained the only thing that mattered: a real home and the opportunity to be the person he always should have been. The story of Ethan's and Lana's unconventional redemption is now complete. Thank you so much for accompanying me on this writing journey.